Before we get into tonight's stories, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I write these from New Jersey, and every time I see how far they travel, it genuinely surprises me. Let me know you're out there. The way it ended with Jordan was fast. That was the part I wasn't prepared for, not the end itself, because I'd been thinking about ending it for weeks, but how quickly he shifted once I said the words out loud. We'd been together almost 2 years. I'm 31, teach middle school, and I live in a suburb of Indianapolis in a house I rent with a woman named Mackenzie, whom I've known since college. Jordan and I met through a mutual friend, and for the first 6 or 7 months, it was good, easy, relaxed. I felt like I'd found someone on the same frequency as me. But somewhere in that second year, it changed. He got quieter, more watchful, more distant. He started asking questions that didn't quite fit the conversation, as if he were checking my answers against something. Who else was at that thing? What time did you say you got home? He never accused me of anything directly. That's what made it hard to name. It was always framed as curiosity or concern, or just him being thorough. But I started to feel like I was always being cross-referenced. The specific thing that broke it for me was the Find My app. I'd shared my location with him early on. Both of us had. I stopped thinking about it. Then one evening, I was late leaving a colleague's birthday thing, and he called 4 times in 20 minutes. And when I called him back, he knew exactly where I was before I told him. He mentioned the restaurant by name. He'd been watching my location in real time, checking it while I didn't respond, and he told me this like it was a normal thing to have done. I ended it 3 days later. He didn't take it the way I expected. He was very calm, almost businesslike, and that calm had a quality I didn't know how to read. I turned off location sharing that night. The calls started the following week. Not constant, not enough that I could point to them and say this is harassment. 1 or 2 a day, sometimes 1 every couple of days. I didn't answer most of them. He left a few voicemails that were just him talking, long and circling, not threatening, just this patient, persistent pressure. Like he was making a case for something and just needed me to hear him out. Then the calls stopped, abruptly, around the 3-week mark. I told myself it was over. I even said that to Mackenzie. I think he's finally done. A few days later, she came to my door and said, "There's a car parked in front of the house that's been there since this morning." I looked out the window. Dark blue pickup. Jordan didn't drive a dark blue pickup. He drove a gray Subaru. But when I looked up the plate number through a friend who works in insurance, it came back registered to his older brother. I don't know if his brother was doing him a favor, or if Jordan was sitting in the passenger seat where I couldn't see him. The truck was too far away in the dark to tell, and I wasn't going to walk out there. It was gone by morning, but it was there 2 days later. Then gone again. Then there. I called Jordan once, directly, and told him I knew about the truck and that I was going to file a police report if it continued. His voice did something strange, this quick recalibration, and then he said he didn't know what I was talking about. He sounded almost offended. Which was, somehow, the most unsettling version of that conversation he could have given me. I filed a report anyway. The officer I spoke to was straightforward with me. Without a clear threat, there wasn't much to act on immediately, but the report created a paper trail. She told me to document everything: dates, times, license plates. I started keeping a note on my phone. The truck came back one more time, about a week after the report. Then it stopped. For another 8 weeks, I never heard or saw him again. Then Mackenzie invited me on a few double dates that didn't progress. I decided it was time to dip my foot back in and signed up for a dating site. Within 48 hours, I got a hit. A guy who checked off everything I liked. Good photos, easy conversation, didn't lead with anything weird. His name was Drew. He taught at a university, liked hiking, had a dog. We messaged back and forth for 3 days and it felt natural. Effortless in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Then something small snagged. He mentioned offhand that he hated the restaurant district downtown. Too loud, too crowded, not his scene. Jordan used to say the exact same thing, almost word for word. I told myself that was nothing. Lots of people feel that way about loud restaurants. But I started paying attention differently after that. He knew I taught middle school before I told him. I went back through our messages and couldn't find where I'd said it. I was almost certain I hadn't. He also knew I lived on the east side of the city, which I definitely hadn't shared. When I asked him how he knew, he said I must have mentioned it. Light, casual, no hesitation. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I took one of his profile photos and ran it through a reverse image search. It came back to a LinkedIn account that belonged to someone in Portland, Oregon. A real person, clearly. Different name, different life. No connection to Indianapolis. The photo had been lifted and repurposed. I didn't say anything to Drew. I kept messaging him like nothing had changed. But I started keeping a record. Screenshots, timestamps, the exact wording of things that didn't add up. I showed Mackenzie. She went quiet halfway through, then pointed to one of his early messages. Something he'd said about preferring text over calls because phone conversations felt performative. She looked at me. That's what Jordan always said, she told me, almost verbatim. We set up the date anyway. I wanted to see it through. I picked a coffee place I'd never been to, on a part of town I didn't usually go to. I got there early and sat facing the door. When he walked in, I knew immediately. No disguise. It was Jordan, in the same jacket he used to wear on weekends, looking like he hadn't slept well in weeks. He spotted me and something in his face shifted. Not surprise, not guilt. Something closer to hope. Like he'd been betting on this moment for a long time and couldn't believe it had actually arrived. He sat down. He said hi. Not hey, I'm Drew, just hi, like we were picking up a conversation that had paused. He didn't even try to maintain it. I let him talk. He said he'd just wanted a chance to show me who he really was, that the location thing had been a mistake, that he'd been afraid of losing me and handled it wrong. He said he knew the profile was stupid, but he didn't think I'd agree to meet him otherwise. He said all of this quietly, reasonably, like he was making a case to a jury he still believed he could win. The whole time I was thinking about the fake photos, the stolen LinkedIn profile, the 3 days of careful, patient conversation designed to make me feel exactly the way he needed me to feel. He was sitting across from me, telling me he just wanted to be honest, and the only reason we were in that room was because of an elaborate lie. I told him I had screenshots of everything. I told him if I heard from him again, in any form, through any person, on any platform, I was going straight to the police with all of it. He sat with that for a moment. Then he said he just wanted another chance. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I picked up my bag and left. I called a realtor 2 days later. I found a place in a different part of the city. New neighborhood, new commute, new coffee shop on the corner. I didn't tell anyone from my old life the address except Mackenzie, and I made her promise not to share it. 3 months after I moved, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. There was no message, just a screenshot attachment. It was an overhead satellite image of my new neighborhood. I still check my location settings every few weeks. Force of habit by now. Probably always will. I'll preface this by saying I know how it sounds. A 6-month relationship, early 20s, just a bad breakup. People will hear that and think it couldn't have gotten to the level it got to. I thought the same thing. For a while. Donnie and I met when I was 23, working nights at a hotel front desk in a mid-sized city in Georgia. He came in as a guest. We talked too long. I gave him my number against the better judgment of basically every instinct I had. But he was charming, attentive, and a little bit more interested in me than I expected. We dated for 6 months. The relationship wasn't bad, exactly, but it was built on an attention dynamic I didn't fully see until later. Donnie needed to be the most important thing in any room he was in, and when he was with me, that room was my life. When I was focused on him, it was great. When I wasn't, when I had a night out with friends he didn't know, or a phone call with family that ran long, or just an evening where I needed to be left alone, something in him went flat and cold, and he'd be distant in a way that felt like punishment. I ended it on a phone call, which I know isn't ideal, but I'd tried to do it in person once, and he talked me out of it in a way I still don't fully understand. This patient, sustained pressure that made me feel like I'd been unreasonable for wanting out. The phone call was my way of not letting that happen again. He didn't argue. He said okay. He said he hoped I'd reconsider. I said I wouldn't. For 2 weeks, nothing. I started to relax. Then I got a follow request on an account I hadn't connected to my name. A secondary Instagram I used mostly to follow photography accounts. No profile photo, username that was just a string of numbers. I hadn't given that account to anyone from my personal life. The request was from a blank account. I denied it. 3 days later, a different blank account. I don't know how he found it. I've turned it over in my head 100 times, and the most likely answer is that it was linked somewhere I didn't notice. A comment I'd left, a tag, something. But its specificity was what scared me. That he'd been looking carefully enough to find something I hadn't shared. I changed my number around that time, told almost no one the new one. I made my existing accounts completely private and audited every follower. Then my coworker, a woman named Amber who'd met Donnie once at a thing I'd brought him to, told me he'd messaged her. Casually. Just checking in, he said. They'd barely spoken at that party. He asked how I was doing. He was using the people around me to track the edges of my life. I still don't know how many people he contacted. I only found out about Amber because she told me. I didn't confront him. I thought about it, the same way you think about touching a bruise. You want to know how bad it is, but you already know it'll hurt. Instead, I sent a single text from my new number so he'd know I had one. I know what you're doing. It needs to stop, or I'm going to the police. He texted back 17 minutes later. He said, I haven't done anything. That was it. That was the whole message. The follow requests stopped. Amber said he didn't message her again. After about a month of watching for it, there was nothing to watch for, and then another month passed. And eventually, I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop and tried to move on. But I think about the blank accounts sometimes. About how long he'd been watching that secondary profile before he sent the request. Whether the request itself was intentional, a way of letting me know he could see me, or whether he just slipped up and I happened to catch it. I think he slipped up. I think there were things he was doing that I never caught. That's the part I can't put down. Not what I know, what I don't. I want to be clear about something before I get into this. I was not blindsided by who Melissa was. I knew she was intense. I knew she got attached quickly, that she texted in long paragraphs when most people sent 2 words, that she remembered things I'd said months earlier and brought them back up in conversation with a precision that was flattering at first, and then, gradually, wasn't. I knew all of that going in. What I didn't know was what it would look like when that intensity had nowhere to go. We'd been together 14 months. I was 26, working a mid-level logistics job, living in a 1-bedroom in a mid-sized city in Ohio that I'd moved to for reasons I no longer remembered clearly. Melissa lived 12 minutes away and came over most evenings. It started to feel, somewhere around month 8 or 9, less like a relationship and more like a second occupancy. She had toiletries in my bathroom, a drawer, a key, which I'd given her during a stretch when I was traveling for work and needed someone to water my plants. I didn't ask for it back when I stopped traveling. That was my mistake, and I knew it even at the time. I was ready to call it off. Then she got COVID. It gave us some time off. It was bliss. Then she recovered, and Melissa was back to her intense self. I had no choice but to pull the trigger. The breakup was about as clean as these things get. I did it in person, at her apartment, on a Saturday, so she wouldn't have to go to work afterward. She cried. I felt terrible. I stayed longer than I should have because leaving felt cruel. By the time I got back to my car, it was almost dark. The first week was quiet. She sent a few messages, not many, nothing alarming. I kept my responses short, but not cold. I thought we were doing okay, whatever that means. The second week, I started noticing small things. My recycling bin was in a slightly different position than I'd left it. Not dramatically different. Maybe 6 inches from where I always put it. I told myself I'd moved it without thinking. A blanket on my couch was folded. I don't fold blankets. I bunch them up and leave them at one end. That one I stood in front of for probably 30 seconds before deciding I must have done it half asleep some morning. Then, sometime in the 3rd week, I started waking up around 1 in the morning for no reason I could identify. Just coming out of sleep all at once with a vague, unfathomable dread. I'd lie there and listen to the apartment, and it would be completely still. I'd check my phone, see nothing, put it down, and eventually drift back off. Then one night I woke up, and the apartment wasn't completely still. There was a sound from somewhere toward the kitchen. Not loud, not a crash or a footstep. More like someone being extremely, deliberately careful. A soft contact, then silence, then another. I lay there and didn't move for a long time. I told myself it was the building settling. Old building does that, or a mouse or the refrigerator compressor doing something new. I told myself every reasonable thing I could think of. Then I heard breathing. I'm not someone who startles easily. I've never been afraid of the dark. Didn't grow up with a lot of anxiety. But there is something that happens to the human body when it registers that it is not alone. That the room it thought was empty is not empty, and it does not care at all what kind of person you think you are. My heart rate doubled in about a second. I didn't move. I kept my eyes almost shut, tried to breathe normally, and tried to think. The sound moved. It moved from the kitchen doorway toward the living room. Very slow, very quiet, like someone who'd been in this apartment before and knew exactly where the floor creaked. She had a key. That was the thought that came. Not who is this? Not call the police. Just, she has a key. I sat up and turned on the lamp on my nightstand. I said her name into the darkness of the hallway. The silence that followed was the worst part, because it was a specific kind of silence. Not the silence of an empty room. The silence of someone who had just stopped moving. Then she stepped into the doorway, still in her coat. She looked at me the same way you look at someone when you're caught, but haven't decided yet whether to pretend you're not. She said she just wanted to make sure I was okay. She said she wanted closure. If she could lay beside me for 10 minutes, then she'd leave and never come back. I should have told her to leave. Instead, we sat on the couch. Then we talked. Then she took off her coat. That's when I knew I was in trouble. She wasn't wearing anything underneath. An hour later, she left. She went without argument. The next morning, the key was on my counter. She'd left it there. I don't know if that was an apology or a demonstration that she no longer needed it. The locksmith came that afternoon. I went through every closet before I went to sleep that night, and the night after that, and honestly, for a while after that. I still think about the folded blanket, about how many times she might have come in before the night I woke up, about whether I'd slept through it before. I've never found an answer I'm comfortable with, so I've mostly stopped looking for one. For the first time in weeks, I felt relieved. I told myself the nightmare was finally over. 6 weeks passed without incident. Life started to feel normal again. Then the text arrived. An image with the caption, "Thought you should know." I told a female colleague of mine that I think I needed a COVID test. She asked why, and I sent her the text Melissa had sent. She called me almost immediately. That's a positive pregnancy test. I've been trying to reach Melissa ever since. For 14 months, I couldn't get her to leave me alone. Now I'm the one calling her. And she's not answering. I'd been with Cara for almost 2 years when I finally admitted it to myself. The relationship was dead. It didn't feel like a partnership anymore. It felt like a job I couldn't quit. It wasn't dramatic. That's the thing people don't understand when you try to explain it later. There was no single incident, no blow-up, no screaming matches. It was just a slow, suffocating accumulation of weight. She needed to know where I was, always. It wasn't even standard jealousy. She just couldn't function without a constant location update. I'd go to the gym, and my phone would have 3 messages before I finished my first set. They weren't angry, just, "Hey, you good? Let me know when you're heading back." If I didn't respond within 5 minutes, a call, then another. I started turning my phone face down at restaurants. Then, I started lying about where I was going. That's its own kind of slow poison. By the time I worked up the nerve to end it, I'd been rehearsing the breakup in my head for 3 months. I picked a Sunday afternoon, her place. I told her I cared about her, but we weren't working anymore. She was quiet for a long time. Then she just said, "Okay." She sounded completely calm. I almost didn't believe it. I should have known better. The messages started 2 days later. At first, they seemed reasonable. "Can we talk? I just need to understand what happened." I responded to a few. I tried to be kind. That was my first mistake. In a situation like this, kindness is just a door left slightly open. Then the tone shifted. The messages grew longer. Interrogative. "Who was that girl in your photo from 2019? She was deep diving through my Instagram. I'd set it to private, but I hadn't blocked her yet. Why did you like her post?" The post was from a former coworker, someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. I stopped responding entirely. The messages kept coming anyway. About 2 weeks after the breakup, I was walking back from the corner coffee shop near my apartment. I noticed a car parked across the street, a silver sedan. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but as I reached my front door, a heavy pressure hit me. That instinctual feeling that someone is staring at the back of your neck. I turned around. The car was running. The windows were heavily tinted, dark as pitch. I stood there for a long second, told myself I was being paranoid, and went inside. 3 nights later, same car, same spot. I couldn't prove it was her. I'd never known her to drive a silver sedan, but it was always gone by morning and always there between 8 and 11 at night, sometimes right in front of my building, sometimes half a block down, lurking in the shadows. I told a friend about it. He just said, "Just block her." I did, but blocking someone doesn't make them stop. It just blinds you to what they're doing next. Then things got weirder. A mutual friend named Derek, a guy I'd known long before I ever met Cara, suddenly cut me off. I ran into him at a bar, and he wouldn't even meet my eyes. He looked terrified of me. He muttered that everything was fine, found an excuse, and bolted within 4 minutes. I realized then how completely isolated I was becoming. I didn't know what kind of lies she was feeding people. I still don't. By week 5, the exhaustion was breaking me. I decided to talk to her. I know how that sounds. But I genuinely believed that if I could just have one calm, face-to-face conversation, she would finally hear me, and the nightmare would end. I texted her and asked to meet at the park near the library on Saturday morning. Public place, daylight, no mixed signals. She showed up. She looked completely fine, which somehow made it worse. I forced myself to be direct. I told her the relationship was over. I wished her well. But the messages and the silver car had to stop. I told her straight out, "I haven't called the police yet because I didn't want to ruin your life. But I will if this continues." She got quiet. That same eerie, blank quiet from the day I broke up with her. Then she nodded. She said she hadn't realized how it was coming across. She said she was sorry. She promised to give me space. She almost had me convinced. For 10 days, total peace. No messages, no silver car. I started sleeping again. I actually thought I'd handled it right. Then came Thursday night. It was 11:40 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. I crept to the front door and looked through the peephole. I didn't recognize the man standing in the hallway. He was massive, not tall, but incredibly wide. The kind of heavy build that takes up the entire frame of the glass. He knocked again. Harder. I froze. I didn't open it. Then, he shouted my name. Just my name. Loud. He knew exactly who was on the other side of that door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I backed up into the dark kitchen, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. I kept my voice to a panicked whisper. I told the dispatcher a strange man was trying to get into my apartment, and that it was connected to an ongoing harassment situation. She told me to stay on the line. Officers were en route. The shouting stopped. The hallway went dead silent. I thought maybe he'd given up. Then came a sound I hoped to never hear again in my life. It was the slow, deliberate scrape of metal. Someone was working at the lock with a tool, taking their time. I told the dispatcher. She repeated that the police were rushing, but they were still blocks away. The door clicked open. It swung inward a few inches before catching violently on the security chain. He slammed his weight against the door. Once. Twice. The third time, I heard the wood grain split. The metal housing of the chain was cracking. I backed up against the far wall of my living room, completely trapped. I couldn't even breathe. The fourth time, the chain snapped. The door flew open. The massive man stepped into my apartment. He locked eyes with me in the dark. But just as he took his first step toward me, a heavy crash echoed from the hallway. The stairwell door had been kicked open. Two shouting police officers flooded the doorway with their flashlights. The man turned and bolted. But there was only one way off my floor. They had him pinned to the ground in the stairwell within 60 seconds. Cara was arrested at her home that exact same night. I found out later the man was a cousin of an ex-boyfriend of hers. I don't know what kind of lies she told him to get him to do that. I packed up and moved out of that building 6 weeks later. I went to a completely different neighborhood. I didn't leave a forwarding address with anyone I didn't absolutely trust with my life. But there's one final detail that stays with me. It's the one thing I keep coming back to when I can't sleep. When I was giving my statement, I described the silver sedan to the responding officer. I told him I'd been noticing it lurking around for about 3 weeks. The officer looked down at his notebook, sighed, and told me I was wrong. According to Cara's phone and financial records, she had rented that silver sedan and had been parking outside my building every single night, starting the day after the breakup. That means she was watching me for 2 full months before I ever even noticed the car. I look back at that broken door chain sometimes, and I don't think about the man who broke it. I think about Cara. I wonder what she told him, and I wonder what they were planning to do to me once that door finally swung wide open. If these stories kept you up tonight, my psychological thriller audiobooks are on this channel. Full length, same dark tone. Completely free. Start with Perfect Sister. When I See You, nurse Meg Simpson finds evidence that her fiancé and sister are hiding something. Her search for the truth becomes an obsession that threatens to destroy everyone she loves. Link in the description.